Hi everybody, and thank you for joining Confirmit's webinar, How to Optimize Your VoC Program for Maximum Success. My name is Dina Otero, and I will be your moderator today. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. We will have time at the end of the presentation for Q&A, so please submit your questions in the chat window on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. Additionally, this webinar will be recorded and will be available to all of our registrants along with the slides. Today we are joined by Stefan Kolle and Claire Sporton. Stefan is one of the founders of Futurelab. As an international consultant with a background in insurance, finance, media, and venture development, Stefan heads the research, customer insight, and innovation practice at Futurelab. He is able to combine ambitious and, if necessary, controversial vision with pragmatic views. Claire has specialized in customer feedback for over 15 years. Claire has run programs in the financial services sector and more recently supported a wide range of organizations in the development and implementation of programs that not only drive improvement in customer experience, but deliver measurable business results. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it on to Claire.
Thanks, Dina. That's great. And hi, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you to this webinar. So what we're going to be talking about today is really how you can lift a program out of the ordinary and actually deliver some outstanding results for your business. As Dina mentioned, I'm joined by our great friend Stefan Kolle, Senior Partner at Futurelab, who has a stupidly ridiculous amount of experience of working with organizations to ensure that those programs really do truly deliver business results. We want to try and make this webinar as interactive as possible, so we've got a few polls going through the webinar. Stefan and I will be talking, but as Dina said, please capture your questions. It makes it much more interesting for us to understand what your concerns are, and we've left some time at the end to make sure we've got time to answer some of those questions for you. So our aim today is to give you a framework for a great voice of the customer program. So if we liken our program to a kind of an uncut diamond, what are the key facets that we should be focusing on to make sure that our program really sparkles? But before I reveal our five facets to our maturity model, a quick introduction. I just wanted to talk quickly about why now. And I really liked this quote from Forrester, actually, that the number of truly awful customer experiences is dropping like a rock. Now, of course, that's good news for consumers and business buyers alike, but of course, it's bad news for the massive companies who are now all in just average. Let me give you an illustration of this. So here is our standard bell curve on quality of service, showing that nice small number of poor going through to the vast majority which are okay, and then obviously reducing back down to a smaller number of great. And if we overlay that with the customer experience of that service, if it was poor, of course, our customers end up dissatisfied. If okay, then you'd have thought they'd be satisfied. And if it's great, surely they're going to be loyal fans. I'm afraid not. The reason is that not only is that bell curve shifting to the right with less really poor experiences, as Forrester mentioned, but also to add to our pain, our customers' expectations are changing. You know, thanks to the likes of Apple wowing us with products that we didn't even know we needed, and companies like Zappos and John Lewis wowing us with great experiences, the situation looks more like this. So it's not good enough just to be okay. Our customers and clients are expecting great service, and if we don't get it, they're going to be very vocal in their complaints. So if that's the problem, as our customers' expectations mature, how can we ensure that our customer experience program matures at the same rate and is ready to respond to those changes of expectations of our customers? So as I said, in this webinar, it's about how we take a voice of the customer and make sure it matures in a balanced manner and ensures that we drive maturity across all aspects of the program. So let's start by looking at where everyone on this call is when it comes to the maturity of the program. So this is kind of our first poll, and we asked this whilst you actually, when you actually registered for the event. Stefan, we can see we've got a good split of people across the different statements, haven't we?
Yeah, and I'm actually quite happy to see that we've got quite a few early in the process, because like with any project, any program, it's essential to think it through from the beginning to make sure that we get the right results. If everybody had said that they were well established, would have said let's find a different occupation, or let's interview everybody to do case studies.
Absolutely, wouldn't it be great? No, you're right. We've got a good split. We also did a quick breakdown by industry as well. We had three key where we had, a significant number of responses. So we felt that those were the three that we could actually pull out. But maybe that helps the people who are on the call to see where they sit compared to their peers across their industry. And it must be said, for me, I think that reflects my understanding of the maturity of the market. I think maybe because I've come from a financial services background, but I see a lot of financial services who have had a program running for a number of years, and so I'm not surprised to see so many of the people on the call today from the financial services arena in that in progress and well established. But it's great to see that split across the other key industry types as well.
Yeah, and we actually see that it is particularly financial services that seem to have awoken in the last year or two to the need to really take customer experience to the next level. And to do that, you need a solid voice of the customer program. You cannot develop a proper customer experience if you don't know what actually moves the customer, both in a rational and an emotional sense.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you, Stefan. So we've talked about this diamond that's sitting in our top right-hand corner, and this need to have a model and an understanding of the different facets that we should be focusing on. So what are our 5 facets of a maturity model? We've identified 5 key areas, and they're up on the screen at the moment, around developing a vision that gives the program a good basis and ensures longevity, to design a program that brings insights and understanding across all channels and all customers, to drive action and focus on continued improvement. Can't get away from making sure that we're fostering the right culture where employees are engaged and drive the program. And finally and critically, this piece around demonstrating value and being able to measure the results of our program and communicating them back into our business. And what we're saying with this maturity model is that it's really important that we have that balance across the program, that we ensure that we polish each of those facets of the diamond equally. Because obviously, in reality, we often have an area that we're either really good at or really interests us, and we can find that we focus more on that. But that doesn't mean that every program will be totally balanced. I think that's a little bit unrealistic, so that's why I haven't put a straight line on this chart. Obviously, different aspects are going to mature at different rates, but I think as the customer experience practitioners and professionals, what we need to do is ensure that we develop each of those aspects in an aligned and balanced manner. And unfortunately, quite often the line doesn't even look as straight as that. The thing we've got to watch is that we don't end up with a situation that looks more like this. Does this ring any bells with you, Stefan?
Yeah, I see a lot of organizations where somebody, typically the boss or a customer, has said you have to implement a voice of the customer program, or for instance a net promoter score program. One of our clients was a big call center operator, one of their customers, an auction website, had said, you have to do NPS, and we're going to pay you based on your NPS. Now, a great process-oriented company knows how to roll out a program like that. But nobody ever explained to the call center operators, why are we doing this? What are we trying to achieve? Where do we want to go with this? So all it ended up with was call center operators who tried to game the system because their rewards were based on a metric that nobody ever explained why.
That's a really good example. This piece around, if people don't understand why they're doing something, they might follow the steps, but actually it doesn't really drive the right behavior. Brilliant. So what we'd like to do in the rest of this session is really to look at each of those key facets in turn. And let's start with creating the vision. And that really brings us to our first poll. So for everybody who's on the call at the moment, if you could please tick the boxes that are appropriate to you. So you can tick more than one option, but please can you see, as part of your VoC program, do you? And I will show you the results so we can see them as they're coming in. So things are still moving around a little. Delighted to see that define your program strategy is coming up. It was looking a little bit low a minute ago, Stefan. But great. It's really interesting as well to see this piece around developing the business case itself, that's lagging slightly. Around, actually ensuring that we've actually defined the return on investment and where the value is going to be for the program.
I think many people think that making the business case is a highly complex process. We will go into it a little bit later, particularly in the last section, and show that there's actually some relatively simple steps you can take to show the business case to the rest of the company.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's just delve down into that first one, Stefan, around creating that vision and strategy.
I think the key thing is, let's not go in blind. We have to have some kind of a vision. Where do we want to go? Why are we doing this? What are the key elements that we need to look at? And reversely, that means that we have a number of factors of failure. If you don't have a strategy, if you don't have a business case, if the customer journey is not developed or understood, if the KPIs don't work, if we have silos within the organization, and most importantly, perhaps, if we don't change the culture, we will not be able to create the optimum results from our program.
Fantastic.
And if we start with simply the strategy and the vision, we need to have a far-out goal. We need to have something that we aspire to, somewhere we want to go. And I always use the example of Columbus. Columbus had a big goal. I want to reach America. He didn't know where it was, and he didn't know exactly how to do it. So he had a strategy which was based on the vision. I'm going to take a number of ships and I'm going to sail west. But he started with some very clear and simple tactical steps. First, load up the ships with food, water, etc., and sail to the last known point, the Azores in his case. So we need a strategy, we need a vision, but we also need to make clear what are the first steps we're going to take to achieve, to execute that vision.
Absolutely. Breaking it down into those key steps, key phases that get us moving on that journey.
And the next step is, of course, talking to the boss. And you may recognize Mr. Gordon Gekko. He's very easy to convince to do things as soon as we talk to him about money. At the end of the day, if we want to motivate the organization as a whole, we need to show where is the money in doing this. We're not doing it for love or bonus points or Disneyfying our business. So before even going into the big details, there's an awful lot of research out there, and we'll be happy to share that with you in a different setting. Email us afterwards. There is tons and tons of research showing us people who are happy with what we deliver to them recommend us, and people who recommend us generate a lot of money extra for the business. They spend more, they negotiate less, they're easier to service. In other words, their calls to the service center are shorter and they leave our staff happier, which is not unimportant as well. And they do actually generate a lot of new business by recommending us to their friends, their family, etc. We'll come back to that a little bit later. The next step is, of course, we need to have a good map of our customer journey. We need to understand what are the steps that our customers go through. And for each of these steps, we need to understand what are their rational expectations, but also what are their emotional expectations. What are the minimum basics, the minimum steps, the minimum service level agreements, whatever you want to call them, that we need to deliver. In other words, how do we not upset them? How do we make sure they don't run away from us? But again, that's not enough. We also have to look at how do we delight them? How do we drive them forward in their journey with us? And how do we turn them into recommenders? And this customer journey, we need to know what are the steps so that we can also look at where do we need to ask our customer? Where do we need to engage with them? Where do we need their feedback? And this in turn then also reshapes the customer journey. Because one of the big mistakes many companies make is that they forget steps within that journey. For instance, an example from our practice, at the top you see the typical setup many companies have, in this case an automotive company. Simply 3 steps: pre-sales, sales, and after-sales, which are also 3 organizations within the company which hardly talk to each other. The reality, for instance, in automotive is that waiting, in other words, the moment after buying the car, but before delivery, is a huge, impactful step for the customers. And if we don't manage that, and if it's not assigned to either sales or after sales, or ideally a combined factor, we will never be able to wow the customer. And finally, there are a couple of more things. I already mentioned conflicting KPIs. We often see that in companies, half of the KPIs are focused on customer experience and customer satisfaction, while the other half is focused purely on sales numbers.
On the revenues, on the financials. Revenue. Yeah.
And if you don't align those KPIs, you will have a breakdown. Which it then again comes back to the silos within the organization. Everybody looks at their own little shop within the company, and it's very hard to work cross-departmental. But if you want to solve problems for the customer, you have to work across departments. And finally, and this again links back to the silos, etc., you will find organizational resistance. If you don't change the culture, in the long term, it's very hard to change the experience. We'll come back to that in one of the later
Great.
sections.
That's great, Stefan. So this key piece at the beginning of a journey, we were seeing at the beginning that we had 20% of people who were just thinking about starting this journey around voice of the customer and customer experience. Key piece is to create that vision in the first place. Understand, like Columbus, where you're going, and then understand the tactical actions in addition that you need to put in place. Okay, so let's assume we've got our vision in place. We've got that one facet of the diamond nicely polished. Let's move on to the second piece, which is really around the design of the program and making sure that we've got a very robust design that's going to deliver what it says on the tin. And what we'd like to do, we've got another little poll for you. Be really interesting to hear, and obviously this is all anonymous, so don't worry. How confident are you that your VoC program is well designed? Through extremely confident all the way through to not at all confident. So if you could start voting now, and then we can bring up some results for you to see where we're at. A lot of people at the moment, as you can see, just kind of sitting on the fence a little bit at the moment, and I do understand that feeling personally from, God, am I really sure? Is this really doing what it says on the tin? Good to see the number of people who are absolutely confident in that. Okay, I'm going to let that keep running for a second. But what I'd like to do is really to start thinking about this importance of design and why it's absolutely critical to the maturity and the success of our VoC program. I think a picture tells 1,000 words, and the words of Ralph Beth, I think that's the correct pronunciation, the CEO of Jaguar, I think are wonderful. If you think good design is expensive, you should look at the cost of bad design. And I think that's maybe why a lot of people were sitting on the fence and talking around what are they sure? Do they know that they've got good design? Because this fundamentally underpins your program. If we're not measuring the right thing, then we're making decisions based on the wrong insight. So if we're looking at making sure that we get that design right, what's critical for me is that we get it right first time. And we're always going to be looking to improve. We're always going to be looking to extending our program over time. But the problem that we have with these types of programs, as Stefan was talking about from a cultural perspective, if we don't get it right first time, we can undermine our programs, that we can really undermine the engagement of our teams across the business. But if a program is designed well, it's going to be part of the business for some time to come. So it's critical that we get that design of our framework robust from the start. We need to make sure that our program is more than just another survey. Critically, I think we need to align this with our customers. We keep hearing the phrase, right questions, right people, right time, and that's so important. Survey fatigue is a real issue for us, and we need to make sure that we don't hack people off.
If I may just give a quick example, one of our customers, they had a 40-question questionnaire which actually stretched over 14 pages. And a lot of those questions were effectively doing an audit on their service organization. They used the customer to audit their own organization instead of looking at what does the customer himself actually want.
Absolutely.
So one of the pressures within an organization with voice of the customer is typically, let's ask a couple of more questions.
Yes.
Let's focus on the core of it. How do we understand our customer better?
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point that you make, that as the professional sitting at the center of the organization managing this type of program, it's really difficult to say no, but we need to keep control of this. As you say, it's every different part of the organization. It's only one more question. Could we just add that one more question in, because it's going to really help me? One of the questions I quite often use in that situation is, what are you going to do with the output? When you get those results in, how are you going to use it? And if I don't get a really strong answer from that business unit, then potentially that potential question may sit to one side for a while. The other area I think we need to focus on when we're thinking about alignment, we've got to align with the customer, make sure that this is relevant. We're asking people for the right information at the right time, and they can understand why we're asking. But also we need to make sure that we're aligned internally, that we understand. Stefan was talking about the different silos within an organization. Are we asking about the feedback at the right touch points, those key moments of truth for our customers, and the priorities internally for improvement? Is there the appetite within our organization to make sure that we're going to take action on the results that we're receiving? My second point here is around a consistent but flexible structure. And I think this is particularly important when it comes to very large multi-country organizations and complex organizations. But it does apply to all programs. Make sure that you have a framework in place for your program. Often I would use a customer journey map as the backbone to that framework, and also then understanding the different channels of communication and the different functions within my organization. And the key point of that framework is that we need to ensure that we have consistent metrics across all of the business, but the framework gives you the ability to ensure that specific countries or specific business units can build their program based on their business priorities and the maturity. So as long as it fits into that wider framework, then globally we'll have those consistent metrics in place and a consistent maturity model to enable people to understand how they can drive their program forward locally. My final point from a design perspective, I've just kind of called it keep it real. It's very easy with this type of program to get fixated on numbers. And as we'll hear with regard to some of our other facets, we do need to engage our teams. And for some of those groups, numbers just won't hack it. So we get all of this great feedback from customers and we turn it into numbers. Now, of course, the metrics are important, but often the key to engagement is bringing it back to the human level. So rather than looking at a table of numbers showing the key metrics for each of the areas of the business and each of the key touch points, let's get to the true voice of the customer. I could talk here about opportunities to capture, audio through your call center, or even kind of videos, that kind of VoC pop situation where we can ask customers to actually talk about their experience and use those videos in the boardroom to really bring your execs on board. But let's just keep it simple. Let's make sure that we take full advantage of the verbatims that we all include in the vast majority of surveys that we run. But we have to be careful. We can bring that text in, and text analytics is hugely powerful, and it's critical to help us organize this mass of unstructured data. But we could be in danger of turning our stories, that voice of the customer, back into yet more numbers. So my key piece on design, again, when thinking about how we report this information back into the business rather than when we capture it, is let's please not lose the stories. Let's use those verbatims. Let's use the images that we can to really bring this alive for people. And as you were saying, Stefan, that piece around, what's the emotion that our customers have at the moment. I think this quote, which is real, is amazing, around the emotional piece that this woman was feeling. The accident was bad enough, but I was more traumatized trying to sort out the claim.
One of the biggest changes in the corporate policy we achieved at a global electronics company, where the CEO was somewhat resistant or disengaged to the whole process until we showed him short clips of a lot of global consumers telling him, literally, conglomerate, you suck. And everybody was very nervous about us doing this, but first he laughed, but then he said, well, thank you, you brought this point alive to me. That was the moment where this company then changed globally into a customer-centric organization.
Fantastic, yeah. And it is that piece, it can be the aha moment, can't it, that really drives a good understanding of what this means to our customers. Okay, I'm going to jump on now to our third area, and this is really, it's quite interesting for me how driving action is sitting right there, slap bang in the middle of our maturity model, and for me this is the core of every successful program. So many organizations, there's so many stats out there at the moment around how many organizations are capturing feedback, but then how few are actually driving action off the back of it. So just bring me to my next poll. So everybody out there, if you could click the buttons that apply to you, do you use the program to follow up with your customers? Do you use it to identify actions at a local and at a global level? Are you sharing the results with your staff and ensuring that they're empowered and ensure that they've got the right resources to do something with it? If I jump to the results, you're still please keep answering the questions, but we can see where the numbers are coming through. Good to see that over 50, we've got to remember we've got some 20% of people who haven't got a program running at the moment, and obviously they're probably sitting in the not applicable bucket. But we've got 58, coming up to 60% who are not only following up with their at-risk customers, they're identifying actions. And great to see that people are sharing the results with staff, Stefan.
Yes. Again, going all the way back to the beginning, if we don't explain to the people within the company, within the organization, why we're doing this, we can't expect any change from them. It is, on the other hand, noticeable that empowerment of the staff is relatively low. I know it's a hard one to drive, but at the same time, that is, if we ever seek for a panacea, for a simple solution, just empowering the frontline staff is often the easiest way to ensure an improvement in customer experience.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Okay, so keep answering them. Obviously, we're going to be sharing these results, so we'll give you, within the slide deck that you receive after the webinar, you'll be able to see the final results of the poll. But if I kind of jump on to, if we're talking about action, if we're really looking to drive change within our organization, what different types of action are there that will ensure that our VoC program will drive change? And I've identified two here, and I'd like to focus on each of them in turn. So the first one that I'd want to talk about was, firstly, let's talk about this tactical action. So this is about taking action at the individual customer level. So getting some feedback from an individual customer, employee, partner, it works across all our different stakeholders, and taking action at that level. Now, for me, this is, of course, what we would call the classic tactical closing the loop. But often, when we talk about closing the loop, we focus on negative situations, the unhappy customer who needs to be turned around. Now, what I'd like to do is to suggest that we need to move away from that and really start thinking about the next best action, rather than just looking at recovering negative situations. So how can we use the feedback we've received from an individual customer to help us understand what we should be doing next? It might be that we need to recover a bad situation, or it might be that we've got an opportunity to extend the range of products and services a customer is buying from us, or even at the other end of the continuum, activate them into actually recommending us to others. So this piece around, when we think about tactical action, let's make sure that we understand that there are a range of different actions that we can take. And finally, on this piece, around let's make sure that we communicate internally the change that we've created. Just because these tactical actions are small and specific to an individual customer, they can roll up into some really great business results for the business as a whole. And often they can be quite hidden, because people don't like to say, hey, you'll never guess what I did. I closed the loop and this is the outcome. Measure it, identify it, monitor it, and then sing it from the rooftop. Tell people what you're doing. Okay, my second area of action is much more around strategic action. I think there's a great example of this. Jeff Bezos from Amazon, he sends a mail with just one simple question mark on it if he sees a verbatim that points to a particular problem. Whoever gets that mail is expected to dig for the root cause, fix the problem in such a way that it will never happen again to another customer. So this piece around the strategic is saying, okay, what action can we take that's going to impact all of our customers rather than just this individual? And this, in the Amazon situation, this is then communicated back to that individual customer and every other customer who had that problem in the past. This is absolutely key, but we shouldn't be depending on our CEO to actually send out those emails. Let's make sure our program helps us identify the key priority issues for our customers, identify the right root cause, and then drive change.
And a key element in that is, of course, that when Jeff Bezos sends that mail, it means that across the company, across all departments, everybody has to work together to solve this problem. Absolutely. In an ideal situation, you don't need Jeff Bezos to send that mail, but
it helps.
It helps. It helps a lot.
It really does. It really does. Okay, so just to kind of summarize on this point, tactical actions will deliver business results, and they really do. We need to make sure that we measure them and we can help the organisation understand the value that your program is driving for them. But we do find that over time, those tactical actions will start to plateau off. And that's why we need to also focus on the strategic. Adding this additional layer on top of those tactical actions makes sure that our program continues to deliver real business value and really builds that culture of continuous improvement. Okay, so we're coming towards the back end of our diamond and the last two facets that we want to focus on. Now let's look at growing culture and growing the culture of our organisation.
Yeah, let's have another look at a quick poll. If we want to drive a program, we need engaged employees. So how engaged are your employees in the program that you have or in the program that you're planning to have?
So
maybe we can skip
I'll show
to the
results
again.
Yeah, let me show you the results. Is that what you would expect to be seeing, Stefan? We've got a good number communicating the value back to employees. That seems to be top of the poll at the moment, closely followed by involvement of stakeholders and actively involving employees.
Communicating the value is a starting point, but it is a very good starting point. And again, we'll come back to that because it is essential to the success of any program. But let's look at the potential downfalls of a program from an employee perspective. If we don't win the hearts and the minds of the employees for the customer engagement program, for the voice of the customer, for the customer experience improvement, it will not happen. Secondly, we need to show the individual employee how they actually impact the customer experience. So a lot of people have the idea that they are irrelevant to that. And finally, if we want to get this going, we need to create momentum in the organization. So the reality is, nobody gets out of bed to move a KPI. Also, nobody gets out of bed in the morning saying, ooh, I'm going to annoy some customers today. But the thing is, we need to get to the next level. And if that next level is that we need to make sure that people want to be customer-centric, they need to be willing. That means showing their minds, showing them the business case, but also showing in their hearts, show how it makes their life nicer, how it makes their work nicer, how it makes the life of the customer nicer. Secondly, of course, we need to make sure that they are skilled, that they are actually trained, that they understand what is going on, that they get an explanation about those customer insights. And finally, they need to be able. And that means they need to have the tools that are necessary, whether it's software or physical tools, but they also need to be enabled. They need to be empowered. Again, one of the biggest elements in getting a good customer experience is simply empowering and enabling your frontline people to do the right thing.
And that was the one that was trailing in the poll that we just ran, wasn't it?
Yes.
But that's the one where maybe we weren't seeing as many programs that feel that they've got that stuff.
And of course the problem is that needs a lot of policy changes and KPI changes and a lot of changes at higher levels than many people feel they can influence. Nonetheless, that is a real essential lever to start working with.
Yeah.
Secondly, we have to realize that a lot of people don't see how they actually support the customer. This is a real quote. It's not a real picture. Not do that to the poor man. Again, in one of the big corporations that we work with, the head of IT said, why am I in this meeting? I have no impact on the customer experience whatsoever. When we explained to him that he actually did impact in a big way, because he was in charge of designing the customer invoices, which led to a lot of questions and dissatisfaction. In all honesty, or in all fairness, it has to be said, once he got that, he actually became a big advocate of the program. But we see this in companies, in a lot of companies, that people, if they don't have a day-to-day contact with the customer, they don't understand how their behavior can actually impact the customer experience, positive or negative. And finally, if we want to get momentum, let's identify those people within the company that get it, that are behind this customer experience, and create a community to them. Because you will find, you yourself probably experience this as well, it's a lonely job out there. Because most people on a day-to-day basis simply want to survive in their job and fulfill their KPIs. But find those that have the heart, that have the guts, put them into a community so they can exchange experiences. Then make sure that they are successful, that they create success with their programs, and then switch on the spotlights. Put the spotlight on them, make them employee of the month or whatever your program is, and just ignore the naysayers and the negatives. Just ignore them. Don't fight them. There's no point in fighting them. But if you make the people show that, hey, what we're doing here actually has a great impact on the customer, at some point your movement gets critical mass. Once you have 10% of the people, you've got a religion and you've got a movement going.
You're so right, Stefan. It's that piece around critical mass, isn't it? It's around taking it away from being just the core team. You know, in the worst case scenario, you know, just one individual. I remember personally being in that situation where I was the one individual, you know, trying to shout from the rooftops. You've got to get this away. You've got to get this embedded in the whole of the organization. I kind of call it kind of, you know, let's go viral. Let's, you know, infect a few people and let's start that critical mass building. And that's how we're going to drive change, and that's how we're going to drive the culture of our organization as a whole. Fantastic. Thanks, Stefan. And now what we're going to do, and this really kind of builds on all of the other aspects of the program, but this key piece around demonstrating the value. The number of conversations that I have with organizations where customer experience is seen as fluffy, something that they would like to do, and of course they will do it, but actually they keep getting pulled back to, you know, the hard numbers and the hard financials. So this piece around demonstrating and showing the value, to me, is absolutely key to the success of our program. Which brings us to our kind of final poll around, you know, where are the people that are on the call at the moment? You know, are you able to share success stories? Are you able to communicate those drivers of loyalty so people understand how they can impact? Have you got a business case which you're updating on a regular basis? And critically, this piece around the ROI. Are you able to track the ROI of your program? Let's have a look at the results. This is not easy stuff we're talking about, is it? It really isn't.
No, it's not easy, but we hope to share a couple of elements with you that perhaps inspire you to take a couple of key steps. I see that everybody shares, or everybody, but a lot of our participants do share success stories. That's a great starting point. And maybe as we're just a few minutes behind and we do want to keep some time for questions, let's move on. If we want to show the value, I think there's three elements where we can really lose it. First of all, not building up the business case. Once we've done the first steps in our program, we have to go back to the business and show, look, this is how we can make money and this is how we have made money. Secondly, we need to close the loop strategically, so not just fix things or deal with the positives at the individual level, but also see how we can turn this into a general strategic change within the company. And finally, whatever we do, we need to talk, we need to communicate with our employees, but also with the company, with the customer. And coming back to the business case, I mean, you remember this guy. Let's look one step further and take an example, and this is a more or less real example. The numbers are a little bit off, but how we do a calculation, and I've done this with car dealership owners, which are pretty hard-nosed businessmen, hard to deal with. They came up with the numbers. if you make a calculation there, if we say, okay, we have a number of purchases that people do, and obviously those who don't like us will do less purchases in the future than those who really love us and are promoters. There's a margin, and there's money we make on the services. And if we simply look at the base numbers here, the lifetime value of a detractor is 1,200 euros and that of a promoter is 5,000. Now that's already worth a lot of attention to change people from detractors to promoters. But the big multiplier is the word of mouth impact, because those people who don't like us stop others from buying cars or mobile phones or whatever from us, and those that do love us bring actual new customers. When we take this into calculation, suddenly the differential between a detractor and a promoter runs into the 15 to 20,000 euro differential in profit. Now that will wake up anybody within the organization, just to look at the individual level. And you, Claire, also have a nice method of looking at it at a company.
Yeah, I think I personally use this method a lot. It's that kind of segmentation. In this example, Stefan, you're using the net promoter piece between detractors, passives, and promoters. But obviously, you can use that segmentation model across any scale that you use. So if it's satisfaction or ease, whichever metric you're using, you can build this segmentation model and really demonstrate for people the value of moving a group of those detractors through to promoters and put a value on that so people can understand whether it's the investment that it's going to be worth putting into that area to drive the change. Segmentation is a great methodology, and I use it a lot, but I just wanted to kind of just also talk about an alternative to the segmentation model, which is looking at some key business priorities. What I find quite often is that organizations are looking globally or within their particular business at a particular piece. You know, this year is the year of the cross-sell. This year we're going to really focus on reducing churn. This year we've really got to make sure that we're driving profitable service, and we need to make some process improvement. If that is the case, and if you have a key strategic business objective that's already been set, what we need to do from a program perspective is illustrate how our program can help people do that. So, for example, if it is this piece around reducing churn, and if with our program, through following up with unhappy customers, doing that closed loop, if we were able to improve the churn rate by a very small percentage, what is the impact going to be overall for the business? And particularly if you've got a few areas in place, you can start to see how this will build up over time and really illustrate to the business, here are some pragmatic, practical things that we can do as part of this program. Follow up with unhappy customers. From a new customer perspective, let's see if we can start targeting some of our existing customers and see if we can actually get them to take the behavior of recommendation rather than just saying they're going to recommend. And also the piece around process improvement. I find it a really interesting one, that piece around, for any of us who've been in a regulated environment, the big piece is around a regulatory fine. If we can stop one of those, then, the rest of the ROI model is really blown away, because some of the figures there really become telephone numbers, don't they?
Okay, just one last minute. As we said, we need to close the loop strategically at all levels, and we need to communicate. Most companies, as you see here, do actually collect customer feedback, but most of them then don't alert the staff. They don't even use the insights they gather to make decisions, and even if they do, they don't tell the customers about it. Now, one very final point that really is close to my heart: we have a tendency to always focus on the negative side of things. How do we stop detractors? How do we make our customers happy? But at the same time, we're ignoring the massive potential that we have in the promoters and the people that are happy, that would recommend us. Because they are out there. They are driving people to our business, and word of mouth is where the real money lies. The problem is that if we ask people, would you recommend us or would you talk to your friends, they say yes. But if we ask, did you actually, a lot of them still say no. So if you want to get a quick win out of your Voice of the Customer program, a really quick win, because it's the least costly option of doing anything, talk to your promoters, your happy customers, whatever. Tell them a story that they can tell to their friends. Ask them, would you recommend me? Well, wonderful.
Great.
Do so, please. And give them the tools to do that. And based on that, you can show a lot of value very early on in your program.
Brilliant.
And I thought that was a nice little bonus at the end, because it's close to my heart, and I see most companies not doing that.
Absolutely.
They're leaving a lot of potential on the table.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you for that overview. And I think it is this piece around, those 5 key areas, those 5 key facets. Each of them are critically important, but actually it's when you actually manage to polish the whole of your diamond, that's when you really deliver a world-class program for your business and for your customers and clients. So, Dina, we've got about 8 minutes left for any questions, if there are any coming through.
Yes, we definitely have a bunch, so we'll try to run through them quickly. So the first question is, how can you measure the moments of truth with your touch points that have been identified in your customer journey map?
Basically, we have the analytical tools for that. Once we take all the feedback from the customers and we do a cross-correlation, we can see not what they tell us, but if we link it to their actions, we can identify which are the key drivers. In other words, what are the moments of truth at each of those steps.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science, but you need a good analyst to have a go at it.
And before you get to the analytics, if the other aspect of the question was, how do you do it? I think it is this piece around look at the touch point itself, understand how the customer is interacting with you at that particular touch point, and ask for feedback using a method that's appropriate to that touch point. And that's where, a wide range of methods of collecting feedback are going to be really important. Both structured feedback from surveys, but also the unstructured, things like the call center notes, the chat conversations, emails coming into the organization. We've got lots of feedback often, but as Stefan said, it's how do you do that analysis, and critically, how do you prioritize across those different touch points to understand where you should invest your improvement buck.
Okay. This question actually came up quite a bit. You talked about the steps for a VoC program. Does the process change internally for internal stakeholders if it's an internal program?
We're thinking about a voice of the employee program, looking at levels of engagement, I'm assuming, internally. What do you think, Stefan? I find this usually significant consistency across both.
On the one hand, your employees are humans, just like customers. I know sometimes it's easy to forget.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the steps we're giving are the steps to success for pretty much any program. So I would say at the top line, at the top level, the steps are the same.
I agree, and I think it is this piece around, there's lots of different voices that we can capture that give us insights into how well our business is doing. So, as the questions are coming in, it's that piece around employees have got great insights. They know what the issues are, and sometimes better than our customers or our partners or our suppliers do. The piece for me is how do you pull those different voices together, and having the one structure, the one maturity model piece covering all of those different voices, you can then start to do the correlation between and really illustrating to your business this link between engaged employees, engaged customers, driving profit at the end of the day.
Okay. How can you identify which root causes are the most important compared to other root causes?
Wow, let's talk analysts. Can we talk statistics?
Again, the same answer as with the moments of truth. This is at the core of any voice of the customer program. Step one, in the functionality, we collect the consumer feedback. Step 2, we analyze it to indeed find what are the most important, what are the key drivers, the root causes, whatever you want to call them.
So, and for me, there's lots of different analytic tools and methodologies around identifying a root cause, through just a straight correlation, through to some very clever relative weight analysis and regression analysis that your technology for your program, I'm sure can provide. The key piece for me, though, is around, let's understand what the key priorities are for me. So I'm a manager of a business unit. I don't know. I'm in Egypt. My priorities in Egypt are going to be very different to my priorities if I'm in Arizona. And I think that's the piece, is that when you have these analytics identifying your key priorities, it must be dynamic. It must be telling each of the groups within your business what their priorities are for the part of the business that they're responsible for real time.
And a key element is, of course, to then also look at the financial element. A perhaps not so high rating business root cause that's very easy and cheaply to resolve should be resolved first, then another one that has a very high strategic impact and a lot of investment.
Absolutely. It's that kind of rocks, pebbles and sand, isn't it?
Exactly.
When you're looking at, you might have some, absolutely these 3 top projects are the biggest root causes of the issue. But if they're all 3 huge investment projects, you might only be able to afford to do one of them and then focus on some more tactical pieces around the others. I think the other piece for me is that quite often what people forget about when they're looking at the root cause, they'll do the analysis and say, here are the key drivers for a great customer experience. But they'll forget to also look at what's the opportunity to improve. So whereas, I don't know, if I'm in a restaurant, the quality of the food is the biggest driver for overall satisfaction or overall loyalty. But if you're already scoring a 9.7 out of 10 for food, you haven't got that much opportunity to actually improve it. So you might be looking at some of the other areas where you've got a bigger opportunity to improve. So when you're looking for your analysis, when looking at defining your root cause, look for a statistical model that provides you with dynamic, real-time insights for each of your areas of business, that also is able to incorporate this piece around opportunity to improve. And then, as Stefan said, let's make sure we understand which ones we should prioritize from an effort perspective as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Claire and Stefan. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. Thank you, everyone who joined today's webinar. And as a reminder, the recording and the slides will be available to you and will be sent to your email. Claire and Stefan, thank you very much, and we hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you all for participating.